I'm Peter Charles and welcome to my video on tying the emerald shiner. If you fish the Great Lakes and its tributaries, you know that the emerald shiner is a favorite forage fish of our steelhead. So it makes sense to have an emerald shiner pattern in our fly box, especially during the fall run when the steelhead are running up our rivers. I've done very well with this fly over the last few years, and it's taken some massive hits. I mean, they really crush it. I've had some flies come back quite bent. So you'll enjoy fishing this fly. Some things to note about it. First off, it's a very sparse fly. There's very little to it. It's a skinny little thing because emerald shiners are skinny little things. So it makes sense to have a fly that looks like the actual bait fish. It uses olive bucktail on top. Underneath it has some pearlescent flashabou, and it also has some chartreuse crystal flash. And it's very sparse. There's very little flashing material there. We don't want this thing looking like a neon sign as it comes through the water. It has a white yarn body, silver tag, and mylar stick-on eyes. Okay, let's get started with our fly. Whenever we're tying tube flies, we always have the choice of copper, brass, or aluminum. When I'm tying minnow patterns, I prefer aluminum since it swims better. The others are a little heavier and they look a little bit more lethargic in the water. So this fly will be done on our aluminum tube. So we just put in the vise. About 3/16 of an inch will do. Tighten it up. And we're ready to start. Okay, the thread we're using is Danville's fine monofilament. That may seem like a strange choice, but you'll see at the end how useful this is. It allows the material underneath to show through, and that's quite useful when you're doing a minnow pattern. It is slippery though, so tie it on firmly. And don't be bashful with it, because things will slip out if you're not careful. Okay, our next step is to tie in the mylar. This mylar is gold on one side, silver on the other. It's uni mylar, size number 12. We tie it in gold side up. So as we turn and start to wrap, it will flip over to the silver side. Now I make large turns like this, leaving lots of gap. You may think this is an ugly way to do it by leaving these large gaps in my wraps here, but what I'm doing when I flip this mylar over and begins to wrap it, it will create ridges. And when I push my junction tube on this section, it will grip the junction tube and I won't have to worry about it slipping off. So we'll throw in a couple of half hitches. I use half hitches a lot because I'm using rotary vices, but I also do it because I like the fact that it keeps things from slipping out and adds some extra durability to the fly. Okay, we'll start with the wrap. I'm pulling on the mylar fairly tightly so it digs in and creates those ridges. Pull back, wrap over. The next piece of material we're going to tie in is the uni mylar pearl. It's translucent, has a nice pearlescent sheen to it, so it looks like the side of a bait fish. Wrap that down. It leaves about 1/4 inch left. Now we're going to tie on our yarn, in this case uni yarn 2X regular white. Just wrap this on forward. Trim off the excess. Again, add in some half hitches and make sure you snug them down so it won't slip off the end. That's especially a worry with tube flies. You don't have an eye of the hook holding this thing on, so it's very easy for a half hitch just to simply slide off and everything comes undone. So now we'll wind on our yarn. Something we won't with our yarn We want this to go on touching turns so we don't see gaps. And the bodkin I'm using here has very little grip, so it doesn't hold the yarn very tightly. As a consequence, the yarn doesn't get pulled thin. If I'm making a soft turn, the yarn will be puffy and it will fill better. You'll notice the angle I'm holding this. That's why I'm getting the touching turns. I won't get too much in the way of a gap. Got to get a little bit here and there, but the fish don't care. I'm not putting this fly into a contest for beauty either. Now we're going to run this body quite far forward, and you'll see why when I build the head. I'm not going to leave a lot of room at the end. Fold over, lock into place. Hitches. Now we're going to wrap our mylar forward and we're going to counter wrap it. Use our hackle pliers here, it gets a little slippery. It turns about 1/8 inch apart. Okay, fold it over and lock into place, and then trim. Now we're going to put in our crystal flash, in this case it's chartreuse. I'm only going to use 2 strands. And as I said earlier, I don't want this fly shining like a neon sign. So I keep my flash subtle, tied in by the middle, flip it over, a couple of wraps to hold it. And now we're going with the limp pearlescent flashaboo, again just 2 strands, again tied in by the middle, a couple of turns, fold it over, make sure everything slides back nice and straight, put in some wraps to lock everything in place. Finally, I'm going to tie in our bucktail. Now, at the base of the bucktail, you can get a lot of short hairs, and this will cause the wing to be stiffer and bulkier than needed. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab this by the tip and stroke these out. Now the second thing I'm going to do is use a hair stacker to stack my bucktail. I normally keep my bucktail unstacked so it tapers nicely, but in this particular fly I want to keep the length rather limited so the fly doesn't appear too large. It also avoids the short striking we often get with steelhead. I want the hook back at the tail end of the fly. So in this case I'm ending the fly right here at this point on my vise, which is about roughly where the hook will be. So I will just put that in there, make a couple of loose wraps, a couple of extra tight ones. I'll check to make sure that is square. As the handle is spinning. And I'll clip this off, being careful not to clip my thread. Make sure it's positioned well. The benefits of the rotary vise, you can turn it over and see how it looks on both sides. Now finish the head. Loose wraps to the back, tight wraps at the front. All the way to the nose. Here comes the benefit of using this clear monofilament. We're going to put our mylar eyes on. We're going to use a bodkin just to pick the eye off. Put it in place. over it with our clear monofilament and holds those eyes in place. Just need a few wraps and then he won't move. We finish off it with wet finishing. And we're ready for the head cement. Again, it's slippery, so sometimes it moves on you while you're doing this. Don't worry about it if it does. Just do another wet finish. I like to use head cement that has a brush when doing this fly, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush that cement right into the monofilament, getting in between the strands, and this helps with creating a translucent head where you can see the colors of the material underneath. I'll do 2 or 3 coats on this fly, allowing it to dry in between. Always get a little bit into the base of the bucktail, keep it in place. There we go. A few more coats and that'll be ready to fish. Last step is to get rid of this excess flash. You notice I push back and trim. That way I get a ragged finish, I don't get a squared off end. There we go, everything is lined up to that point on the vise. That's roughly where the hook will end, and that'll keep some short strikers from getting off. There we go. There's our finished fly. Ready to catch some steelhead, and some bass too, I might add. Bass love it just as much as the steelhead, so don't be afraid to chase a few smallmouth with it. Enjoy it.